the second panel of the day, where we will speak about regulation and MiCA. This is the 6th Finweek in Bratislava, and it's only possible thanks to our partners. Our main partners is the Ministry of Finance of the Slovak Republic, the National Bank of Slovakia, Visa, Binance, BLIK, and 365 Bank. We have our supporters, Portu, CRIF, Slovak Credit Bureau, and Fumbi. An expert guarantee from FINAS, FinTech Insurtech Association of Slovakia, making this conference possible. It's my pleasure to introduce our panel members. We have here from left, Lynn McConnell, Director of Compliance at Binance. Then we have Roman Chandoga, Head of EU Banking Agenda Unit, Ministry of Finance of the Slovak Republic. And Daniel Ďuriač, Financial Technology Innovation Department, National Bank of Slovakia. If you want to introduce yourself deeper, you can do that the first time you get the microphone. And online I have Žvelc, Legal Officer at European Commission. It's a pleasure to have you online. And Natalia Michalova of Counsel, Prosper Pavlovich Advokátská kancelária, is also online. It's great to have you online as well. So, we're going to speak about regulation. We all know that cryptocurrency is something new. Most of us do not know much about the regulation of these processes. Cryptocurrency regulated, maybe it's not regulated enough, or too regulated, or regulated wrong. We hope to get answers to all these questions today during this panel. I know it's very ambitious, but we have lots of clever people on the panel, so I'm sure this is going to work really well. And then we can start with the topics. MiCA. What does MiCA mean? That's a very basic question. We start with that one. Who would like to start with MiCA? Just to explain the basic framework of MiCA. Why not? Daniel.
Hello. Not sure whether it's working. Oh, perfect. Thank you very much. So MiCA, it's a new proposal for regulation. It's acronym for Market in Crypto Assets, and it should be new EU-wide regulation and comprehensive regulation of crypto assets and provision of crypto asset services. So this is the basic facts, and it's in legislative process, and it should be applied in next few years.
Thank you. We will continue with how are the crypto asset regulation going in different countries? Are there any general framework that is similar within EU, outside EU, the UK and US? I will give that question to Lynn, since she's working in the private industry here and may have a great vested interest in similarity in regulation.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Thank you very much. As you know, in the UK, they have regulation for crypto assets, which is under the money laundering regulation specifically in the UK. So that's one example of how regulation can be organized. A number of countries, including France, also has regulation from both the money laundering regulator and the markets regulator. So money laundering is a key aspect of looking at regulation for crypto assets. There are other countries, such as Lithuania, for example, that have their FIU, which obviously is very interested in money laundering, as their primary regulator. So you have markets regulators, money laundering regulators that are focused on developing the framework for crypto assets. If you look at other countries outside the EU, such as, for example, Bahrain, they have more of a combined prudential conduct and anti-money laundering approach. So you have countries around the world that are trying to develop their frameworks, and not all of them are focused just on one aspect of regulation. Some of them are interested in the prudential, the capital requirements for VASPs, also operational risk, resilience, and certainly cybersecurity are all topics that regulators are focused on.
Thank you. I would like to go over to Rock immediately first. You will get... Okay, sorry. You can get the word first then.
Yeah, I think, Ken, thank you. So as you mentioned, I'm from the Ministry of the Finance.
Yes.
We should somehow regulate financial market. So maybe I just would like to, at the beginning, say that we are doing at the Ministry a lot of things. As you mentioned, I'm from the financial market section of the Ministry of the Finance, banking department. So we are doing a lot of things. So starting with banking, then going through the kind of sanctions, AML, then also follows and sustainable and also digital finance. So it means that these broad tasks are covered by the Ministry of the Finance. There is few people of us, so we are try to somehow cover everything. It's not an easy task, especially in the crypto world. That's why we also created in 2018, because we saw that the crypto market and the crypto world is emerging and is getting more and more popular, and it can have huge consequences also on the financial markets. So that's why we, at that time, in 2018, created Center for Financial Innovation as a platform where we can discuss all these initiatives, not only the crypto, but all other in banking, open banking, and so on, and try to reflect it in national regulation. In this regard, I would also like to say that we are closely cooperating with also market participants, but also with National Bank of Slovakia, because we see that this is going to be a huge market in the future, and it seeps more and more into the traditional financial market and traditional financial products and services. So that's why this is important. So I just would like to say this, that we are trying to follow it really closely, but I would say that the market is still a few steps before us, because we are still trying to cover something that is already in place, and it's not really easy task to do it. So all the times we are approached by market participants to change something because the definition is not really good in the Slovak law, or there are new products and new activities on the market, especially in crypto. We could show that ICO, STO, airdrops, staking, and also NFTs, DeFi is a new trend right now. So we are trying to do with this, and also we are trying to somehow cover this and try to reflect the national legislation. It's not easy task, but doing our best.
Very interesting. Now we can get an overview of the regulation within the European Union, since we have Rock representing the European Commission here. I'm very interested to hear what the European Commission is doing in the legislative framework and the MiCA framework to have at least a similar legislation within the European Union.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Just let me start by following up on your questions, what we have currently in the European Union. So we have some elements of AML legislation. There is some regulation just for a few crypto asset services, so for custody and exchange from fiat to crypto. And then what we also have is, what we need to bear in mind is that crypto assets can also qualify as financial instruments or e-money tokens. So there is already legislation in place that covers parts of the crypto space, and they are densely regulated by existing financial services legislation. And then we have national frameworks that have been developed by some member states. And here in this place comes MiCA. So what MiCA will actually do, it will regulate currently unregulated crypto assets. There are some just elements of AML regulation there. It will not touch upon crypto assets that are already regulated. So financial instruments like derivatives, equities, and so on won't be concerned by the MiCA. There will be direct exclusion. So it regulates the space that is currently unregulated. And the purpose of the MiCA is actually to to promote innovation, because what we do is actually provide legal certainty to market operators. They will know what the legal framework is, what are the requirements. It's also important by having a kind of EU regulation that will apply across the European Union. It will enable market operators to scale up their activities across the European Union. They will just need to register in one member state. They will get the password and they will be able to operate across the whole European Union. And finally, there will be also some legitimacy to the sector given by having regulation in this space. But on the other hand, what is important is that we address the risks arising from these new types of assets. There are numerous risks and new risks that are similar to those to financial instruments, but there are also new risks that are arising from that. And these are the risks to consumer protection. So there needs to be robust rules on consumer protection, market integrity. We have provisions on market abuse. Then financial stability, because if the project become too big, they may endanger financial stability. And also we should prevent that this could negatively interact with monetary policy. So these are also, on the one hand, you have promotion of innovation. You give, you enable innovation, but on the other hand, you need to address the legitimate risk. And this is what MiCA actually does. Here, let me just stress that what we are regulating by MiCA, we are regulating issuers of crypto assets. Issuers, so it's initial coin offerings of crypto assets, and then also crypto asset service providers. These are two types of entities that will be regulated. On issuers, we then differentiate what kind of assets they are, crypto assets they are issuing. If they are issuing so-called stable coins, stable tokens that refer just to one official currency, they are called e-money tokens. If they issue crypto assets that is pegged to a basket of different assets, they can be commodities, they can be different other crypto assets or even official currencies, we call them asset reference tokens. And then we put in the third basket all other crypto assets that are not covered by existing financial services legislation and are not so-called e-money tokens and asset reference tokens. And then we regulate differently these types of issuers. For general crypto assets, like those that are highly volatile, you have thousands of them. There are more light touch requirements. It's mostly about transparency and disclosure. So they need to produce issuers or offerers of such crypto assets. They need to produce a white paper so that the consumer or the holder will be informed about the characteristic of such assets. There are also some other consumer protection requirements for those issuers. And then you have more robust provisions for stable coins because they raise new risks because they can be very very big projects. They may raise issues in terms of monetary policy because they can be also used as a means of exchange. So here for the stable coins, we have more robust requirements. So they need to be authorized. So there is a kind of license that is given to them. Then what they need to do, there are some capital requirements on them. So they need to have their prudential capital requirements. Of course, consumer protection requirements as well. And then what is also important is that we require them to hold a reserve of assets, fully backed reserve of assets that back the liabilities, because there is always, when you have this kind of stable coins, redemption rights to the holder, so they can come back and redeem these tokens from the issuer, so they need to be fully backed by the reserve of assets. So this is kind of regulation that we are having for issuers, and for crypto asset service providers, we distinguish between a number of crypto asset services. They can be exchanges, exchange platforms, custody, so the wallets, also execution of orders, advice on crypto assets, and so on. There is a number of crypto asset services, which is much broader. What was before, we regulated only two, but now we have the whole range of different services that we actually borrowed, what is on the market and what is actually also regulated by similar legislation for financial instruments. And for those, we have also prudential requirements, own funds requirements, governance requirements. and something what we are having also in other pieces of financial services legislation. And then finally, we have provisions on market abuse, which are also important because we know that there are issues in terms of market integrity in this market. So we also wanted to address these issues.
Thank you.
This maybe this is for the start that I don't want to be
You're
too
still
long.
talking, but I can't hear you now.
Okay, no, I'm just saying that if I can still follow up on some issues if necessary, but
We will follow up on many of these issues, I hope.
Yes.
I just hope to invite Natalia into the conversation as well first. But I do have one little quick question here. Stable coin, is that regulated as asset or as currency? Because it could the aspects of both, if you know what I mean.
We always avoid using the term of currencies in this spectrum because you have three characteristics of the currencies, and most of these assets, they don't have these characteristics. So we call them assets, crypto assets as such. We don't call them cryptocurrencies, we call them crypto assets, and that's it, because we think that cryptocurrency is a bit of misnomer for this kind of asset.
So in that case, we continue with the regulation here regarding stable coins, cryptocurrency, or crypto assets, as we prefer to call it, because some of them, I would think, stable coins have characteristics of currency. You can pay with them and so on in a different way, especially what we talked about in the previous panel, central bank cryptocurrency. But that might be off the topic here for MiCA, obviously. So, who would like to continue with the MiCA framework and the current legislative process and timeline, Daniel? That is where we can continue with the legislative process and timeline for MiCA.
Okay, so the first proposal of MiCA was in September 2020. It was proposed by Commission. Then we had Council mandate, I think it was like November 2021. And then Parliament mandate, it was March 2022. And then after that started so-called trialogues, so negotiation between these three parties. And some kind of political agreement has been reached end of June. And now there are technical negotiations to finalize the text. So hopefully we will get the publication in official journal until end of the year. Maybe Rob can confirm or explain better what are the expectations currently. And then after that, there will be, after publication in official journal, there will be 12 months period. And after this period, the provisions regarding stablecoin will be applied. And 18-month period for all other provisions. So we're talking about 2024. This is probably the year where most provision will be applied.
So it's happening pretty much now in real time.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's not this thing that's going to happen in 5 years or in 10 years. It's really happening now. So let's bring Rock back here, because I think he will have some very interesting comments on the timeline and implementation.
Yeah, just on timeline, thank you very much. It was already, general framework was set. Just to make it more precise, that we are finalizing now technical trilogues. So we expect, because there still needs to be a kind of legal scrubbing process, there needs to be adoption by the Parliament, by the Council, that it's going to be published in spring next year, likely. This is because it takes quite some time before publication and once the trilogues are finished. And then once it will be published, it will enter into force, but the application will be later in time. Now we have 18 months of a kind of transitional period for so-called stable coins or backed crypto assets. It will be a little bit earlier, so we are envisaging 12 months. So full application, as it was said, it's at the end of, autumn 2024.
Autumn 24, yes. And I will go back here to Daniel and Roman. What will be the impact of MiCA in the EU on the Slovak cryptocurrency or crypto asset market, I should say, to not use the misnomer again?
So, current situation in Slovakia is that there are some some kind of regulation regarding anti-money laundering. There are some regulation regarding tax treatment of crypto asset, but there is no comprehensive regulation. And this will be changed by MiCA. So after MiCA is applied, the providers of crypto asset services will need to get license or regulatory approval from supervisory authority, most likely National Bank of Slovakia. And as was already mentioned by Rok, this license will also have passporting. So it means that all these Slovak businesses that will get licensed in Slovakia can provide their services freely in whole European Union. And also crypto asset service providers from other member states can provide their services freely in Slovakia. So, but currently, there is not such requirement. Therefore, the only thing that crypto asset service provider need right now to provide services in Slovakia is so-called trade license. And it's very easy to get. It's quite formal process, and therefore we have over 400 crypto asset service providers registered in Slovakia. So most likely, after this regulation, there will be less crypto asset service providers.
400. How many are actually active?
This is a good question. We don't know.
Nobody knows.
Yes, because there is no comprehensive regulation, no prudential regulation, so this will be changed. And also, as was already mentioned, we hope that this regulation will help to tackle the problem with frauds and scams. There is a lot of frauds and scams in Slovakia, not just in Slovakia, in all EU, related to crypto assets. And one last thing is more transparency. Because, as was already mentioned, the issuers of crypto assets often disclose the information about their crypto assets in so-called white papers. But the quality of white papers varies a lot, so now we will have uniform standards and clear disclosure requirements.
Interesting, because this with fraud is really important because it ruins people's life. They lose their savings. I mean, I've been called up by these fraudsters myself on my phone sometimes. Usually somebody sounding like a London banker talking with a southern English accent, saying they're having such a fantastic investment scheme. And I say, I'm a professor in finance, then they usually hang up on me. And I don't take unsolicited advice over the telephone. But this happens all the time. And some of them works as pyramid schemes as well. I don't remember the name of the big famous one that costed the world billions. I'm from Sweden, and one of the persons behind this is Swedish. That's probably the only reason I know about it. So here, the regulation of issuance is clearly crucial to make this market transparent and functional. And that means that authorities will be able to crack down on companies and people selling non-regulated currency, or assets, sorry, now I said currency again here. But this leads me into Lynn, virtual asset service providers, VASPs. And the regulation and registration that will be a part of this framework, clearly, to avoid fake crypto assets and so on. You emailed me and said you had some issues that you wanted to bring up regarding VASPs here.
Well, just to say that the criteria set out in the bill are fairly clear. They also tried to align the terminology between the FATF 40 recommendations and the MiCA bill so that the terminology at least could be common. So the definition of VASP in one and CASP, crypto asset service provider, in another could at least be aligned. So the money laundering regulations could also align appropriately. So that was a positive move, and I think some of the authorities felt that way. So that was a good thing. They've defined the services that VASP will be offering and custodians, as well as exchanges. So that also promotes clarity. One of the things that we're all looking for in this marketplace is a promotion of clarity. All the regulations can be set out, all the timeframes can be set out, both the requirements for those participants that will be inside the EU, as well as any outside companies that may choose to enter the EU and offer their services. All of that is addressed, at least at a high level, inside the regulation. But I'd like to go back to your comment about scams just a few minutes ago, if you'll let me skip to another topic.
Please go ahead.
The area that I feel is very interesting is where consumers are on the internet and they are actually encountering someone that is promoting themselves as a crypto asset or Bitcoin advisor on some of the major social media. That is the area where I feel we have some of the greatest risk. And we have so many consumers who are not sophisticated in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of their own financial general education. So they are believe that they can be talked into handing over their life savings in some cases. So we have at Binance, a number of different departments that are trying to work on things like this, not just in our Binance Academy and the educational component, but also our departments that deal with investigations and law enforcement. So we try to work very closely and have a high-quality program to assist wherever we can, both, for example, in the UK, the National Fraud Database, Action Fraud, is very well supported, working with all of the various criminal law enforcement agencies like the National Crime Agency or TRACFIN, where we're reporting in France. And so I think it's very important to let everybody know that the exchanges are all the exchanges are making efforts to communicate in this way.
That's important, and I know the Slovak central bank keeps a blacklist of companies you shouldn't deal with as well, and so on. Please, Roman, want to comment here as well?
I just would like to say that we, as a Ministry of the Finance, really welcome this proposal because it makes the legislative framework more clearer, and I would say it's changing the status quo. So maybe it's better for the companies or better for us, but also on the other hand, it creates new challenges for Ministry of the Finance, for National Bank of Slovakia. I can already agree what was said by Daniel and Lynn, that we should focus as a ministry on one hand on the financial stability, because as this crypto is getting more and more famous and it's really used in some traditional services and so on and so on. And also we have to bear in mind the consumer protection. Also, the next challenge, as Lynn said, is financial literacy, because there are lots of companies, not the proper one, maybe that one that would like to use the hype around the crypto, would like to misuse the people, to misuse the knowledge about the crypto. And so this poses, I think, lots of challenges for us and really lots of work to be done from our side.
Yes, and we see it all the time, advertisements in social media that are obvious frauds. Can social media be regulated so they will not have these advertisements where basically you're trying to sell fraud to people? Can that be regulated as well?
Maybe just one short comment. I don't think that we will be able to actually regulate social media in this post, but this regulation can help that all the consumers can find a list of approved businesses. So they know, okay, this is a business that is approved by National Bank of Slovakia or by any other supervisory authority. I know this is honest business. So this is another important part of regulation, that there will be clear list of approved businesses which have license. So this is one thing. And the second thing, like practical experience, we get a lot of complaints from people that they were victims of frauds, but there is very little we can do about it. Right now we can forward it to police, but that's about it, because currently National Bank of Slovakia is not responsible for supervision of crypto assets. This is important to mention.
That is important. Lynn want to say something here.
I just wanted to add that there are regulators that have scam reporting on their regulatory websites. So you can actually go to a section and type in the fake scam name and report it, and they will then put it onto a list, and you can go on and find not only the register of authorized firms, but a full list of pages and pages of the fake names that have been put up in your particular jurisdiction. So they do that very well at the FCA currently, and they have 5, 6, 10 pages of all the recent scam names. So you can find the scam names if you're looking for them in many different regulators.
Very good. And then I suppose the banking system can help out as well to make it more difficult to transfer monetary assets to the fraudsters. Because there I think the banking system has done very little in the last 20 years, to be honest. well, they're not regulated to do it, and they haven't self-regulated it. So more could be done there possibly as well. What would you say from the central bank, Daniel, or Rock from the Commission? We can start with Daniel and then Rock, please.
Maybe just for the banks, well, they have obligation related to anti-money laundering, so they have to cooperate. So it's not that it's just not up to self-regulation. There is a lot of regulation regarding anti-money laundering. But yes, and I would just react to something that Lynn said. We also have a warning site where we publish warnings regarding some, not just crypto scams, but some scams.
Any financial scam, yes.
Market.
I've seen it. It's very transparent.
But yeah, this is definitely a good idea to have some kind of possibility to notify the regulators with scams, and it will probably be useful after MiCA will be applied to have also this blacklist like FCA with many different websites, because the problem is that if we actually put some website on our warning site, they often change the website.
Of course, of course.
It's a never-ending process.
Rock, regarding...
I would just agree about the transparency about, authorized service providers. That would be a kind of brand in the European Union where, the consumers would be informed which are regulated, which are not. And also MiCA, it will be a message that you will have a kind of a blacklist at the EU level as well. So it's not only on the member states level, but the whole European Union, because it is kind of transboundary activity or even global activity. So this is MiCA will definitely contribute to that. But of course, when it comes to the concrete cases of fraud, it's for the law enforcement to do it. We will contribute to this, but we won't solve everything with the regulation.
Okay, Lynn.
I just want to follow on from these comments to point out the VASPs, CASPs, meaning virtual asset service providers and crypto asset service providers, have obligations under the money laundering regulations to report suspicious activity. So they're filing suspicious activity reports with their national financial intelligence units in their own individual jurisdictions where they've been registered. So for in France, Binance France would have an obligation to report suspicious activity and file a SAR, as we say in the financial crime community, and report to law enforcement. So law enforcement in all these various jurisdictions is collecting a lot of information, and they then can take further action under their own national laws to pursue scam artists and other money laundering rings. Many of them are international money laundering rings, and some of them are very, very large. So there's a lot of information that's collected. Some of our law enforcement folks are connected, through their communication networks to Europol and other international law enforcement agencies that are gathering information and hopefully eventually pursuing all of these. So just to let you know that there is a system to report all of this. And I'll turn it back over to you guys.
Okay, Daniel.
Just one short comment. Yes, I mentioned there are over 400 businesses, crypto asset service provider registered in Slovakia. They are all considered obliged entities. So they have this obligation regarding AML, and they have to report all these suspicious activities to financial intelligence unit. So this is unified in EU. But there's also another challenge, and this is challenge for financial intelligence unit and for police to actually be able to detect the frauds and to check on blockchain what's going on, because this is not something that they are used to. This is a new technology, so it's a big challenge. And there are some companies that are helping authorities detect the fraud and actually look at the blockchain and where are the transactions going.
Seems like a job for the big four to a large extent.
Well, there are specialized companies which specialize on blockchain analytics. So.
Okay. What's the risk of over-regulating this market to slow down innovation? And Europe have too much regulation, end up behind, let's say China, United States, and the rest of the world, because the regulation simply becomes too cumbersome to be quick to market with new products, new platforms. Anybody wants to jump on that one?
To be honest, another question, because we are all the time approached by the market that we are over-regulating the financial market and so on and so on. So it's not easy task for us, but as I mentioned, as we have to face the financial stability issues, consumer protection, and so on. So we have to find a balance, and sometimes it's really hard to find that balance if you are if you see that there is a lot of scams on the market. So there have to be some regulation, strict regulation. When we compare it to banking, so banking is developing many hundreds of years, and the regulation is getting stronger, stricter. So I think not in such a way maybe, but in similar way should go also in crypto. But the problem is that the crypto market is developing so fast, and it's not so possible to really to be flexible to change the law as the market evolves. So it's a challenge for us.
Okay. Lynn, can that be solved with good laws, broad laws, and not too specific legislation?
Well, I wanted to respond to your comment about limitations or things that might be over-regulating. And the one example that comes to mind is something that was referenced in the earlier panel, which is around the limitations on trading for stablecoins in the EU, because the outstanding trading volume for Tether and some of the other large stablecoins that are currently very actively used are significantly larger than the EU limit. So currently that is something that Martin mentioned that the Commission may further address. So that could be an example of over-regulating or extremely having, a reaction to the Terra Luna,
Protectionism in plain English.
Very much heading in that direction. So I just wanted to mention that that could be considered an example of that. If you look at the United States, you have two very strong government agencies, both of whom are looking the Commodity and Exchange, the Commodities Futures Trading Commission and the SEC.
Yes.
Both of them are looking at potentially overlapping interests in various, in regulating various cryptocurrencies. So we have competing interests in sometimes. So that also needs some clarity. And I think President Biden has issued some executive orders, and the White House is in the process of publishing papers to try and address that. So we'll see some more clarity coming out of the U.S. in the next 6 months to a year, I think.
Interesting.
I would just like to react to what Lynn said.
Then I want to rock after you, Daniel.
Yes,
please.
Regarding these e-money tokens denominated in other than official currency, this is definitely a big problem. I think it's being addressed in these technical trilogues, in technical negotiations. So there shouldn't be limit for issuance of e-money tokens referencing dollars for trading. So this is actually our position, and hopefully it will be clarified. Maybe Rob can then mention something about it. And just one more quick comment regarding your question of possible overregulation. we think that this proposal of MiCA makes sense, but there are some areas where the current rules of MiCA would not be applied properly, and this is decentralized finance and non-fungible tokens. And therefore, we were glad to hear that these two areas should not be directly covered by MiCA.
And why is that a good idea? Not covering it by MiCA?
Because actually nobody involved found the right solution how to regulate something which is decentralized. So if we have real decentralized finance, it's very difficult to regulate, and you cannot use the regulation for centralized crypto asset service providers to apply to decentralized finance. And also for non-fungible tokens, it's something different if they are truly non-fungible. Then you cannot apply rules that are prepared for fungible tokens. So
I see.
It's a very good approach to just let these non-fungible tokens and DeFi for later and to find out the right balance, as Roman mentioned.
Very good. Rock, I would like you to join us here and talk about over-regulation and the issue with stable coins for transactions and the regulation in Europe.
Yeah, so it's always important to see what are the risks arising from certain assets. So that's also the approach in the MiCA. So where we have these cryptocurrencies that everybody knows, that they are highly volatile. We have warnings for the ESA. Please be careful when investing. They are highly volatile. You may lose everything because there is no inherent value. So they are very lightly regulated. It's mostly about a bit of consumer protection, right of withdrawal, assets, so crypto assets, white paper and marketing communication needs to be, drafted in a way that is correct, so that is not misleading. So these are kind of light touch approach. But when it comes to stable coins, just as a background, the trigger for MiCA was actually, as the background was the Libra project, when then the whole international community was grappling with the question, what about if this becomes extremely big? It can have currency substitution effects on financial stability. So it was in the international level, in the international fora, there have been recommendations written about that. So, and we have taken inspiration from these international standards that have been developed in the G20 format. So this is important to note. And the MiCA, how it approaches that we have the rules for stable coins, you have an authorization for issuers, but then when they are big projects under a certain criteria, they become significant stable coins. And then they need to meet additional obligations. So for example, higher own fund requirements from 2% of the reserve assets, they will go to 3%. Then a remuneration policy, more liquidity policy, and so on. So we have this approach of about significant, and then also the supervision will shift from the national competent authorities to the European supervisors, to the European Banking Authority, for example, for arts, completely. For e-money tokens, it will be partially to the European supervisory authorities because there is an interlink with the e-money directive. So this is the approach we have taken. And in addition, in the co-legislative procedure, there was a lot of concerns, that these stable coins, they could be used as a means of payment, so as a means of exchange. And that's why in the co-decision procedure, there have been certain limitation introduced in this process. And this goes the same for e-money tokens, because if they are denominated in foreign currency, they can have a similar effects of currency substitution. So they are also treated in a similar way as arts when it comes to using them as a means of payment. So this was a kind of a compromise that was reached in the decision procedure, and the aim is really that they should not become widely used as a means of payments.
Thank you. One follow-up question there. Stable coins seems to be perfect assets for shadow banking and this kind of activities as well. Is that something that MiCA will address in the future as well, or is it in the current framework? I don't know who is the best. Yes, Daniel will take this question.
Well, it kind of addresses this because e-money tokens can be issued by banks and e-money institutions, and as a reference tokens can be issued by banks or as the issuers of asset reference tokens, which will be licensed according to MiCA. So it's not really shadow banking if actually banks are issuing these stable coins. So this is also very important to actually bring regulatory clarity for these stable coins, because there was a lot of questions whether they are e-money or whether they are not e-money and what are the criteria, and now the criteria will be clear.
Okay, but if it's a non-bank institution issuing stable coin.
E-money institution?
Exactly.
This
Libra, as a good example.
Yes, but they will be supervised, so it will be not like something in the shadows. They will be supervised entity which will be issuing these stable coins.
Okay. Lynn.
Meaning they become an obliged entity and then will have the same types of anti-money laundering or other obligations according to MiCA.
That seems reasonable.
Yes, in other words, you're putting them into a classification of an institution that has regulations fully applied to it.
That seems reasonable.
Yes, it does.
And can MiCA give Europe a competitive advantage when it comes to crypto assets in general? Can this be something, the regulation that makes it a stable, good, trusted marketplace to be more successful than the less regulated world?
Maybe I will try. So when it will be harmonized, so it can create sufficient ground for development in the Europe. But the question is, what the other third countries will react on it? What will be the influence on the Europe, and so on and so on. So there is still a lot of questions regarding this. But my personal view is that it can be a good real ground for development in Europe.
I completely agree. And Daniel?
Maybe just one short comment. Europe will be the first big jurisdiction to actually have clear rules regarding crypto. So I think this could be advantage, because big crypto companies can start in Europe with like being regulated. And also the MiCA can be inspiration for other big jurisdictions like UK or US, which do not have comprehensive crypto assets regulation. So I also think this could be opportunity, but it is always about finding the balance. If this regulation turns out to be too harsh, then it could stifle innovation. So we will see in the next few years.
I suppose different countries will implement MiCA differently as well in the European Union, like with all other legislation. So there'll be some, what we call them, regulatory havens, as we always have in any European market currently. I guess with the same thing in cryptocurrency.
I'll gently defer to my European colleagues here, but if I understand correctly, it's a regulation, so it's not supposed to allow for a lot of interpretive room. And so if it's a regulation, it's going to be interpreted quite precisely and therefore applied uniformly across.
That is the idea, but yes, different central banks will interpret the regulation differently and so on.
I also can fully agree that this regulation, so all the member states should have the same treatment. But on the other hand, as I mentioned, there is a lot of challenges, especially as regards taxation and other levies. So I think this will maybe the key driver for the companies where they would like to be based.
Yes, taxation will matter for sure. That's probably more important than how the regulations will be implemented.
I'm not going to speak about taxation. Not my area of expertise, but I will say in the very long run, how the supervisors, the European supervisors, take up the task of enforcement, the market surveillance and the EBA, and how they will regulate the stable coins, of the significant stable coins as defined in the regulation, I think will be the real heart of the matter. If Europe is seen as having not only a stable framework, but consistent enforcement and market surveillance, I think it would be very successful in the long run.
Good to hear. Rock, what do you think of the European Union being able to harmonize this throughout the member states and create this marketplace?
Yes, it was already mentioned. So it's a regulation. So it's kind of not harmonization of the national, but it's unification, because it will be directly applicable in all member states. And we always need to, trust our member states and competent authorities that they will implement them diligently. And in addition to that, we have EU supervisory authorities, and in certain cases of significant stable coins, they will also take over the direct supervision, which is also important. So there will be a supervision at the European level. I would just agree with the previous speakers. So the implementation and enforcement is the key. But now it's a bit premature to look so far in advance. Now we are still at the stage of policy design, of finalization of the trialogues and entry into force of the MiCA.
Okay, Lynn, over to Binance. I mean, you're one of the biggest players in this market and one of the more stable players, I must say. And I would even say trusted players in this market. I suppose you're lobbying quite a lot in regards to legislation and development, so it fits your business models and so on. Is the European Commission and the legislator listening to you, or are they running their own race? That's basically the question.
Well, we've had the opportunity through some of the industry associations to be in dialogue. And also we have my colleague Martin Brunko here, who has some very good dialogues with a number of different officials, both at the EU and national levels. So we have a government affairs department that also is involved in all these dialogues. So I myself in the compliance department don't engage with that day to day. But yes, I do believe we have very appropriate dialogues and have had good reception. And we also have had our CEO, CZ, who's had some publicity around some of his visits. So I think we've had a good dialogue all around.
That's great to hear, because industry input is needed for good regulation, obviously. And at the central bank, how do you see this with the input from the industry?
Yes, we are trying to communicate with the industry. For example, we have Innovation Hub, and most inquiries in our Innovation Hub are related to crypto assets. And also we are discussing via, for example, FinTech Association, like
yes, of course, yes,
Slovak FinTech Association. So we are cooperating with them. But in the end, the legislative process, we are participating together with Ministry of Finance and permanent representation of Slovakia in EU. So we are participating in this process, but we are trying to hear what this market is saying. And therefore, we, for example, conducted a survey regarding consumer approaches to crypto assets. We have conducted survey regarding crypto asset service providers in Slovakia. So we try to listen to what market is saying.
Very good. And at the Ministry of Finance?
As I mentioned, we do have that Center for Financial Innovation.
Very good.
The platform where we would like to, where the intention is to discuss with market participants all the issues they have and try to somehow solve maybe some burdensome legislation, maybe, and so on and so on. So we are trying to discuss, what we can, and also, as it was mentioned, to strike some kind of balance, because sometimes the queries from the market participants are quite strict and high. So really, we have to be the good policeman and try to really strike that balance on the market and to protect financial stability and consumer protection.
Lynn?
I do just want to mention in passing that there is a concept of regulatory sandbox, which the UK originally promulgated over 5 years ago. But they have now partnered with some international regulators and are sharing data across regulatory sandboxes between the UK and Australia and several other jurisdictions. So they're trying to make the sharing of information around innovation much more rapid in the international regulatory community. So a regulator in Singapore can actually get some data from an innovative product sandbox project in the UK if there is a sharing arrangement between the regulators. In a very unusual move recently, the Bank of England has set up a financial stability sandbox so that it can also do some innovation in its space as a central bank. So people are trying to use the sandbox concept for innovation and share information. And if you're a project, a startup project in a regulatory sandbox, you have a perimeter for experimenting with your project that gives you complete free pass on any enforcement actions. So you're able to experiment with your project without any regulatory risk. That's the idea.
Interesting.
Yes, I would just mention that we have opened our own regulatory sandbox for January this year. So, and we are also cooperating with other authorities. There is possibility to have actually cross-border participation in sandbox, cross-border testing. So this is inside Europe, inside European Union, but we are looking forward to international cooperation. So we are trying to be cooperative and open to innovations.
Very good. I learned a lot about international cooperation in this area. That's very good to hear, because that's what I really think is needed. Countries can't pull this alone, because we need a similar framework around the globe and the same regulation within the European Union, clearly. How does regulation look like in the rest of the world? Anybody know any regulatory efforts in similar ways as MiCA that is moving along in the rest of the world that can be interesting as an example for Europe, or a bad example for Europe for that matter? How does it look like in the rest of the world? Because I have no idea. I mean, cryptocurrencies are worldwide, so countries must have regulated them somehow or completely ignored them. Do you know anything about that, Rock, by any chance?
So I'm now more distracted with negotiations of MiCA than with following these developments. But as far as I know, that the international efforts are focusing predominantly on stable coins, regulation of stable coins in other jurisdictions, whereas MiCA, which is very important, is a comprehensive legal framework that not only covers stable coins in terms of issuance, but also all other crypto assets that are on the market. So this is important to let you know. And in addition, the implementation is the key, but also international cooperation is the key. So we have a forum of the Financial Stability Board and G20, where we are cooperating with our international partners on the regulatory matters, and there have been recommendations on that, and work is ongoing on this matter. So this is important. It's important that we have the framework regionally, but it's also important that we have a kind of coherence and consistency across the globe on these regulatory matters.
Very good. Thank you. Lynn?
Just a brief mention that both Singapore and Hong Kong have taken up regulatory approaches to crypto assets. Again, focusing primarily on anti-money laundering. But I can't really comment more on that.
Okay, so AML is the big issue here for most countries. Now, we have an open discussion. I will not give any leading questions. So if anything you want to say more about MiCA and regulation, now is your chance, Roman.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know right now what to add.
That's okay. That's okay. You don't have to add anything. If there's something that you were thinking of that you wanted to say and didn't have the chance to tell us, that's all.
Not for now. Maybe I will.
Okay, no problem. Same for Daniel here.
Maybe just one thing. Roman mentioned taxation.
Very good. Now we're coming to something.
Slovakia. And when we conducted these surveys, market participant, crypto asset service provider, told us that this is one of the biggest free obstacles in Slovakia. Taxation is one of them.
I believe that.
Because taxation of crypto assets in Slovakia is stricter than or not so competitive with other countries in Europe. So this is a big issue, and I know that market participant, also FinTech Association, are opening this issue with Ministry of Finance, with members of Parliament. So we will see. I think the implementation of MiCA will be a good opportunity to expand the tax treatment of crypto assets as well.
Yep. Now we can't forget a comment from the ministry here.
Maybe to add to this, so we already have on the radar the taxation, It means that we very informally started yesterday some discussion, informal discussion, what we can do, how we can do it, what could be the result, but we are really at the beginning, and we just do not want to change the current framework. And at the same time, I have to say that the ministry is not really well equipped with experts on crypto assets, so we need time to discuss it properly, to understand what's behind it, NFTs, non-fungible tokens, decentralized finance. And afterwards, we can somehow maybe find solution how to improve or make less burdensome taxation in Slovakia. But for now, it's really preliminary to say something. But I would just conclude it's in the focus on the Ministry of Finance. We would like to do something, as we already discussed with FinTech Association and other companies in FinTech related to crypto. So we are trying to somehow cover it.
Would it not work to treat crypto as exchange-traded equity, basically?
It's really too early to say something.
Okay. Lynn, please.
I think you touched on a very important topic, which is the regulatory community doesn't have enough experts in this area. People who understand smart contracts, also the law societies need to be looking at the interpretation of the law relative to some of these technology developments, such as smart contracts. How will they be treated in a court of law, or in a lawsuit? So there are lots of different areas where expertise is needed, and there aren't enough people that have this technology expertise in the regulatory community and in the legal community. So we need we need more education, more, in business schools and in law schools, as well as just training young people generally about digital assets, so that we can have a group of collaborators in this market who are all focused on the technology development that we all want to see happen.
Okay. Daniel?
Yes, I agree with Lynn. This will be also a big challenge for supervisory authorities. Once they become responsible for crypto assets, they have to hire people who actually understand the technology behind crypto assets. At least some of them have to understand the technology. So this will be definitely a challenge, especially in small countries like Slovakia, where there is not such a lot experts in this area. And just one more thing. There was during this summer activity called Action Plan for Digital Transformation of Slovakia, and one of the points that we, together with Ministry of Finance and FinTech Association, put there was to analyze the possibility to change the laws in Slovakia with regard to smart contracts, with regard to DAOs, with regard to tokenization. So this will be also the area that Ministry of Finance, FinTech Association, National Bank of Slovakia will be looking at in the next few years.
Okay, good. Rok, anything else you want to add into the MiCA regulation or crypto assets in general?
So just, so I would fully agree that capacity building will be also very important in this sense. Just one final word, just to draw your attention also that besides MiCA, we have also proposed a pilot regime on trading and settlement, trading and settlement of financial instruments using distributed ledger, so blockchain. This is also important because it's a kind of sand-like proposal, so it will be a legal act at EU level that will promote the use of the distributed ledger technology for trading and settlement of financial instruments, which are currently already regulated by the financial services legislation, which will actually enable to get some flexibility in application of the current rules, to gain experience and to be able to inform policy developments in the future. So, and this has already been published. It will enter into application early next year. So it's something that I also wanted to stress, because we talked about unregulated crypto assets, but we have also crypto assets that are already financial instruments.
Interesting. Very good. Any last comments on our topic from any of the panelists? If not, I will give questions to the floor. My Slido app stopped working, so we're doing this old-fashioned way. I'm handing out the microphone. Any questions to the panelists?
Hello. I would like to have maybe one basic question. If it's finally agreed who's going to implement and oversee or control subjects related to MiCA in Slovakia, it will be NBS or it will be Ministry of Finance or who? It's my basic question.
Well, in Slovakia, we have integrated supervisory authority, which is National Bank of Slovakia. So most likely the responsibility for supervision of crypto assets will be responsibility of National Bank of Slovakia, but we will see after it's implemented, but this is like an expectation.
Okay, then I have maybe one additional question, not so funny one. You mentioned during discussion that we have roughly 400 subjects which have trade license because it's very easy to have it. I'm pretty sure that also the biggest ones, companies like Binance, for example, doesn't have it. And not only Binance, but Binance is the easy to point to because it's the biggest. And they are providing the services here. So you are ready for control or all the work which just need to be done because lots of platforms also are they don't have permissions also for derivatives trading, and they are doing it. And we didn't see any activity from NBS to stop it. So it will be very, very huge amount of work to be done. So what is the perspective?
Maybe just one short comment. Currently, we are not responsible for checking whether someone has trade license. This is a responsibility of trade licensing office. And regarding other aspects, if there are some companies which are doing business without license and we get complaint, we will look at the complaint, but it's not in public. Supervision is not something that is done in public, so we will definitely deal with any kind of complaints, but you mentioned specifically Binance, so I probably...
Because it's the biggest one, so that's why. I didn't want to ask Mrs. Lynn because it's a very tough question.
Anyway, I will comment there. Companies like Binance and so on will, of course, use one or a few markets under the passporting rights to operate in those smaller markets. I don't see that Binance will be regulated by every single supervisory authority in every single European country they're operating to a large extent. That is a statement for Lynn, please.
We currently are registered in 3 EU jurisdictions, France, Spain, and Italy.
Yeah.
With a registration as a crypto asset service provider. So we would, upon the final promulgation of MiCA,
Yes.
to be eligible to apply for a passporting arrangement under the MiCA provisions.
Exactly.
Under the ESMA supervision.
Exactly.
And my understanding from reading the bill is that you're able to register your applications under one national competent authority with ESMA, and within 90 days, ESMA has to respond, and that is the way you would then take up a passporting arrangement within the EU to other EU jurisdictions.
That's great. Be a one-stop shop for serious crypto platforms and so on. We have time for more questions.
Thank you. It's not maybe directly related to MiCA, but it's, I think, a current issue, and it will definitely, in my opinion, require a regulatory opinion or some entry. It's pretty currently Russian agency Izvestia announced that according to Central Bank of Russia and Ministry of Finance of Russia, Russia will accept Bitcoin and other crypto assets as a mean of payment in international trade as of 2023, which apparently bears a huge risk of sanction violation, sanction circumvention. is it something that is currently being like evaluated, and I believe this will have to be reflected in this process, and maybe it can even speed up these regulatory efforts.
Just one short comment. If I understand it correctly, I think sanction also apply to crypto assets, also the sanction against Russia, and crypto asset service providers are obliged entities, so they cannot provide services to sanctioned persons. So I think this is kind of covered, but yeah, definitely the sanctions are ever-going process, so we will see, and maybe there will be another form of sanction to deal with the issue that you described.
I can only fully agree that crypto is covered. So in case that these obliged entities will break the rules, so there will be somehow treated, So it's their responsibility to avoid such actions. So it's up to them in case the intelligence units or other competent authorities will find out that they just are breaking the rules. So it will have its consequences.
Yeah, I mean, apparently, for the sanctioned entities and for the crypto service providers, they are covered by AML legislation, but still we already see huge schemes through which, for instance, Russian oil is being smuggled to European ports, and the payments for such schemes I think inherently are easier to be maybe hidden in this crypto sort of flow of funds rather than through like this traditional banking.
Just one short comment. One of the consequences of blockchain is that you can actually analyze the transactions. So this will also be a challenge to actually analyze who is behind the transaction, and if there are some sanctions circumvention via cryptocurrency or via crypto assets, I think it will be covered maybe in next sanctions. But I do not, at least from my knowledge, I do not think that it is that big issue right now. That there are other forms of avoiding sanctions and not just with crypto assets, because one of the negative aspects of volatility of crypto assets that is difficult to do trade with, for example, Bitcoin, if it can decrease 20% in a week. So this is and this is probably the main reason why there is not more trade done with crypto assets. But if there is way to avoid sanction with crypto assets, I think it will be covered in next sanctions if current sanctions are not satisfactory to do that.
Thank you.
We have a question back here. Please.
Thank you. One of the widely discussed and quite controversial aspect of MiCA is that it does not allow stable coins to bear interest. They should be interest free. And as we are entering the time, the period of quite high inflation in a lot of countries, there is a risk it will migrate actually the interest to other assets like tokenized bank deposits and make stable coins uncompetitive. If you could comment on that.
Yeah, who wants to comment on that? Interest rate free stable coins or...
Maybe Rock can then compliment me, but if I understand it correctly, this is the same for e-money, that you cannot actually grant interest to e-money because that's the difference between deposits in banks which can grant interest, and between e-money and also the stable coins. So this is the reason, because one of the type of e-money, one of the types of stable coin is e-money token. So I think it's for this reason to be aligned with other EU regulation. But
yes, and in addition to that, I would just say that borrowing and lending of crypto assets as such will not be regulated by MiCA, because this is not the service, it's not crypto asset service. So this is something which we will assess, in the review, but currently this will not be covered by the MiCA. This is a service under other pieces of legislation and national laws that is regulated, but it will not be under the MiCA just because of this scope that we touch upon issues that are not regulated currently, but which are regulated. They are regulated by the existing rules already.
I would like to thank the panel, Lynn, Daniel, Roman, and Rock for their great participation and discussion. And I don't know about you, but I learned a lot more about MiCA and the regulation of crypto assets, and I find it very interesting. And I really believe that this can lead to an advantage for Europe to be first out with this, to have a stable regulatory framework that is transparent and easy for the participants to follow and gives a fair level of consumer protection. Thank you so much.